Let's dive deeper into Portland's historic spike in shootings by focusing on the guns themselves.
A couple $100 change hands and voila, you've got a firearm.
Specifically, where are all these guns coming from and how do they end up on our streets?
The vast majority come from private citizens who haven't secured their firearms properly and they're stolen either from their homes or their vehicles.
In the meantime, we've got a big problem in our schools. Fighting among students has gotten so bad, classes are being canceled and security guards are getting called in.
The most recent fight had happened just as school got out. 4 or 5 Salem police cars went speeding by my house up to my son's school.
So why is this happening?
Students are really struggling, not just with the academics, but with the interpersonal development.
Here's the story.
Our entire newsroom was talking about that story this morning. It is insane, and it's in multiple districts, actually nationwide. We'll get to it in a minute. I'm Maggie Vespa. Welcome to The Story, the show that, if you're not familiar, turns your questions and your comments into content. You'll see it throughout the show tonight. So weigh in. Email thestory@kgw.com. It's right down here. Use that hashtag, TheStoryKGW. Our team is, as always, watching for your feedback as we speak. So that in mind, let's get started. All right, first up on this Thursday, the big story, and to kind of set the stage, I'll note we've been talking a lot about gun violence lately, and for good reason. So far this year, Portland is averaging almost 4 shootings per day. 4 per day. And a lot of those shootings hurt or kill someone. Now, a lot of you, like us, are trying to make sense of this. Eleanor wrote, why not address the problem of access to guns? It's a good question, and one investigative reporter, Kyla Boshi, has been looking into.
Elected leaders, they say it's all hands on deck to fight gun violence. Literally, that was the headline on the Multnomah County website in September after a press conference featuring the DA and the sheriff.
There's too many guns in the hands of people that shouldn't possess them. So we have a lot of firearms that are in the hands of people that pose a grave risk to our community.
Which got me wondering, where are these guns coming from?
They're coming from a variety of sources.
To better understand, I met with Portland Police Sergeant Mark Friedman.
It would not be uncommon for us in a weekend in Portland right now to recover the number of firearms you're seeing displayed here.
In one weekend?
In one weekend.
In the first 9 months of this year, Portland police seized more than 1,000 guns. That's far more than all of last year. The confiscated guns come in all shapes and sizes, some old, some new. But most, more than half the guns seized by police, are semi-automatic pistols. What makes semi-automatics particularly appealing to criminals is they generally have higher capacity than revolvers, meaning they can fire more shots before having to reload.
It's one of the more inexpensive pistols that we see. We see a lot of them.
Police theorize most crime guns in Portland are obtained illegally from 3 different sources. They're either stolen, bought through a straw purchase, or picked up in the underground gun market. Jason Chuddy is with ATF and based in Seattle.
The vast majority come from private citizens who haven't secured their firearms properly and they're stolen either from their homes or their vehicles.
Several shootings in Portland, including the September 2020 murder of LaSalle Shakier, have been linked to stolen guns. Court records spell it out. Guns used in violent crimes and murders are also coming from straw purchases. That's when someone who can't legally buy a gun, maybe a convicted felon, has someone buy it on their behalf. Last month, federal prosecutors accused 2 Portland gang members of straw purchasing more than 80 guns. Investigators linked the illegally purchased guns to 10 shootings in the Portland area. And then there's the underground market.
You'd be amazed how many gun transactions are facilitated by the use of social media.
Snapchat and TikTok, they're filled with images of young men and their guns. The weapons are often traded for drugs or money.
A couple $100 change hands and voila, you've got a firearm.
It's the availability and sheer number of guns on the street that frightens Seneca Alexander Sr. He lost his 17-year-old son to gun violence.
I'm sure that anybody can get a gun that wants to get one.
And some of the guns are being modified into mini machine guns.
We've recovered at least a handful of these this year,
In several cases, police found guns altered with what's called a Glock switch or Glock auto-sear, which is illegal. The result? Just listen to the automatic gunfire picked up on a security camera in Portland's Old Town in late August. Police figure most of the guns used in Portland shootings are obtained illegally. But it's important to note legal gun sales, they're through the roof. Last year, Oregon had a record number of background checks, which suggest more people are getting guns.
People are afraid, so you might not have somebody who is a gang member or someone who is in that life, but they might have a gun and they're scared.
Often, a single gun is used repeatedly in multiple different crimes. There's data to prove it. Police analyzed spent casings and found so far this year, 33% of the guns have connections to another Portland shooting, suggesting that the same guns are being passed around or used by repeat shooters. These crime guns, often moving back and forth on the street, are responsible for most of Portland's gun violence.
Okay, KGW's Kyle Leboshi joining me now. So, Kyle, the first question I have, if these illegal guns are being moved on the street, is there anything that can be done?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things, at least what police say, is to prevent lost and stolen guns. Too often they're finding guns stolen in home burglaries or car prowls. The problem is those guns, they end up on the street. So gun owners, they've really got to lock them up.
And we know you've been tackling this issue really one question at a time. So I'm wondering if you can tell us what's the next question you're going after.
Sure. We're kicking around a lot of different ideas, really. Ghost guns, they're untraceable. They're becoming more common. We're thinking about maybe looking into that. Also, do rewards work? Those $1,000 rewards, do those work to help solve crimes? These are just a few of the ideas, though. We'd love to hear from you. If you've got anything specific to gun violence in Portland, send us your questions.
All right. As our viewers know, the story at kgw.com is the place to send those. Kyle Leboshi, thank you so much. Let's get to this email. Speaking of, from Paul, he wrote, I feel disconnected when you simply report a shooting and/or death with no information about the victim. Why can't we say their name and make them a real person rather than a mere statistic? So, Paul, we agree. We appreciate it. This is really important. So on our website, kgw.com, we've compiled a look at who these victims are and what we know about them. It's a long read, because Portland has recorded more than 70 homicides this year. That's the most in the city's modern history, but we think it's definitely worth your time. Again, you can check that out at kgw.com. Okay, let's talk now about a disturbing trend in our schools. And again, we've talked about this for a couple of nights, and it's really striking a nerve in our newsroom and in the community. Teachers say kids are getting into more fights. They're exhibiting more outbursts and, and disrupting class a lot more than they did pre-pandemic. There it is. We told you last night at Reynolds Middle School, it's gotten so bad, they're going back to remote learning for a while. So why is this happening? And how do we fix it? Here's Christine Pitawanich.
Salem Kaiser mom, Tina Reynolds, is one of the many parents worried about their child, especially hearing about the fighting and other dangerous behaviors happening in districts all over.
I have a 13-year-old son. He goes to Walker Middle School. He's been flipped off. He's been slapped in the back of the head.
She says her son Dimitri told her someone also tried to push him down the stairs.
The most recent fight had happened just as school got out. 4 or 5 Salem police cars went speeding by my house up to my son's school.
This video sent to her by another parent.
It shows a fight between 2 students, and then when an adult tries to step in, one of the students attacks the adult.
We're definitely seeing a lot of that just extreme, aggressive behavior. And it's not just the young kids, it's, middle school, high school.
I'm seeing a huge increase in social emotional needs.
Kelly Eckberg at Portland Public and Carly Strauss at Salem Kaiser Public Schools are both school psychologists, and both are leaders in the Oregon School Psychologists Association. They say the reasons for the increased issues are multifaceted and compounded by the pandemic for both students and staff.
Having to endure, whether that's they're getting hit, they're getting kicked, breaking up fights. That's not something that they necessarily signed up for as a teacher.
There is some data available. Salem-Keizer Public Schools says disciplinary actions like suspensions are down when compared to this time before the pandemic during the 2019-2020 school year, with only the number of fights being up. Portland Public is reporting fewer fights and suspensions, but school psychologists say anecdotally, colleagues have said there's been an increase in student behavioral issues and needs compared to before the pandemic.
The information from ODE tells us that that trend was going up for, several years prior.
It's just more of some of the same things we've been seeing.
Angela Bonilla is an educator at Scott Elementary in Portland and frequently works in classrooms with teachers.
Students are really struggling, not just with the academics, but with the interpersonal development. Students have a very low capacity for being able to problem solve independently. So little things, again, become big things. They're pushing chairs, they're kicking desks, they're trying to hurt themselves with their pencils.
Like, how often does that type of thing happen?
Multiple times a day, and it's multiple classrooms, and it's multiple students.
Fights and just a lot of really unsafe situations, which is, leading to burnout by staff.
Possible solutions vary from more funding to hire additional school psychologists, counselors, and social workers, to giving teachers more time to prepare themselves, because now they're having to walk kids through more problem solving and teach students who may have differing and huge gaps in learning.
We can't keep doing the same thing and expect different results. And right now we're in a crisis and we're trying to keep pretending everything's normal and just keep pushing through. But our kids need so much more, and we need the time to be able to give them that.
Bonilla says money and resources to support students through the Student Success Act funneled into districts last year. But because of the pandemic and distance learning, many families had difficulty accessing it. Now the issue is trying to find enough people to fill the open positions, like school psychologists, counselors, and social workers. Christine Pedawanich, KGW News.
Now, we do want to add there have been discussions on whether the removal of school resource officers in some districts is fueling this chaos in classrooms. And both school psychologists we spoke to say they actually don't think that's the case. Even pre-pandemic, when SROs were still in schools, they point out disruptive behavior was already trending upward.
Oregon is getting a bunch of disaster relief money from the feds. It'll go toward wildfire recovery and to help us prepare for, unfortunately, the inevitable next natural disaster.
Put simply, climate change is truly a hammer hitting Oregon.
And we're going to go out on a limb and guess you probably like getting unexpected cash. Well, Oregon taxpayers are not only getting a kicker next year, but possibly another in 2 years as well. When the story continues.
A lot of comments already on the fights in school story. So keep sending in those questions and those comments to thestory@kgw.com or use the hashtag #TheStoryKGW on Twitter. Now, last night we talked about how the illegal marijuana market is exploding in southern Oregon. In fact, leaders from Jackson County are asking the state for more than $7 million to try and tackle it. That money would cover extra code enforcers, more deputies, more staff for the district attorney's office, and more funding for the water master's office, since illegal grow sites often steal water. Predictably, a lot of you had great questions about this. Patsy asked, what happens to all the illegal marijuana found in Klamath and Jackson counties? Patsy, great question. So authorities say usually that marijuana is completely destroyed. For example, we told you about an illegal bust in Klamath County last month where cops found more than 17,000 pounds of weed. Just a casual photo there. All of that marijuana, they say, for example, was completely destroyed by the county's waste management landfill services. Jan asked, if marijuana is legal, in Oregon, who are these large illegal grows selling their product to? Great question. So law enforcement county leaders from Southern Oregon say illegal grows are basically being propped up by foreign cartels. But they say they don't even know who all they're dealing with, given how many illegal grows exist. Here's Jackson County Commissioner Rick Dyer.
Law enforcement has some pretty good evidence that this is a lot of cartel activity, and it's cartels from around the world, not just Mexican cartels, which are what we're normally associating this type of activity with. But we, again, because we haven't been able to really penetrate a very good percentage of the number of these grows, we don't know exactly who we're dealing with, but we just know it's some pretty bad folks, and they're doing some extremely, again, damaging and bad things in the community.
So Wendy also asked us, please break down why some grow operations are illegal while others are legal. I think this is going to help answer Jan's question as well, or give more context anyway. So Wendy, despite marijuana being legal in Oregon, it is still very tightly regulated. Growers have to apply for licenses, which can be really expensive, and then they can only sell to licensed dispensaries or product manufacturers. They also, and this is key, cannot transport their products across state lines. And Oregon's climate is frankly perfect for growing pot. So basically the illegal growers will ignore those regulations and operate farms without licenses and then transport marijuana to places where it is not legal and then just sell it on the black market. Now, of course, there is a lot more to this story, as you can imagine. So as usual, feel free to send us any questions you have or, frankly, story ideas. Let's switch gears for now, though. You might remember a few weeks ago we told you about how Oregon's getting a bunch of money from the feds to help with recovery from the 2020 Labor Day fires. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, otherwise known as HUD, is giving our state more than $422 million, and much of that will be geared toward helping low and moderate income families get housing. Now, after we aired that story, we got a question from Martha. She asked, will emergency funds that HUD is providing relocate houses in areas that are not prone to fires this time? It's a great question. So at the time, we should note, and by the way, we hate this, we didn't have a lot of detail as to how that money would be used. And it sounds like the exact plans for that money are still being worked out. But great timing. Today, Governor Kate Brown spoke at a press conference with the HUD secretary and gave us a little more insight about what that money will actually do.
We plan to expand access to affordable, fire resilient, and climate adapted housing in the most impacted communities. We will work to replace homes for families who've been living displaced for over a year now. And these funds are absolutely critical, frankly, not just for wildfire recovery, but to ensure a longer term equitable recovery that promotes resilience statewide. I became governor in Oregon in 2015, and every year since then, the extreme weather has been worse than the last. Put simply, climate change is truly a hammer hitting Oregon.
A hammer hitting Oregon. So it sounds like instead of rebuilding outside of fire-prone areas, the state wants to focus on making sure that homes can withstand wildfires, which some officials say makes sense because in 2020, we saw fires break out all across the state, from the coast to the valley to the Cascades. So while some areas are more fire prone than others, we've seen that it can happen almost anywhere. And we will let you know when we hear more about the specific plans for that money. In the meantime, do you remember that Canon Beach food tax that was separated by just 2 measly little votes in this month's election? Well, they finally called a winner. And no, they didn't have to draw it out of a hat or a random wooden bowl. It's a shame, though. That would have been cool. We'll talk about it when the story continues. Welcome back, everybody. Remember that terrifying time back in March of 2020 when the pandemic crashed the economy and a lot of people, frankly, got laid off? Yeah. We know, bad topic. You're probably trying to forget about that, but thankfully we're here. So who would have thought, though, seriously, that things would turn around so quickly? Let's fast forward to now. A year and a half later, our economy, a lot of experts say, is doing really well. That's especially according to Oregon's latest revenue forecast. And I think Senate President Peter Courtney summed it up best in our quote of the day. He said, Oregon continues to see robust growth. We did not expect this. Apparently, we've recovered quickly from the economic downturn. Economists don't seem to know why. End quote. Yeah, we didn't see this coming, and we don't know why it's happening, is another way to say that. But it's better than being stuck in a recession. And by the way, that revenue forecast also predicted another round of kicker payments for taxpayers in 2024. That's on top of the kicker that you're for sure getting next year, so 2022 and 2024. If you need a quick refresher on how this works, Oregon's kicker law says if the state collects 2% more in taxes than it expected to during its 2-year budget cycle, then taxpayers get that extra money back. That's what happened in the last budget cycle, and it's what's now expected to happen in this next one. But you might be wondering, does this mean I'm paying too much in taxes? So we asked a state economist that question.
But it's fundamentally about a stronger economy, right? It's not that people are overpaying your taxes. You're paying your taxes according to the law, what percentage, you will owe based upon your income. We just, are expecting a faster, stronger economy than we thought 6 months ago.
There you go. So if you have any questions about the kicker, send an email to the story at kgw.com. Let's shift gears a little bit again. Canon Beach and everyone who visits Canon Beach, you all are going to be paying a little more next time you go out to eat. And you can frankly thank 4 people for that. 4. We're not going to name them, that would be rude. But frankly, if you've ever thought that a few votes here and there during an election don't really matter, well, in this case, they definitely did. Earlier this month, right after the election, the prepared food and beverage tax was only separated by 2 little votes. That tax adds 5% to your bills at restaurants. And now, after ballots have been cured, that 2-vote margin has widened a little. Wouldn't be hard, it was just 2 votes. But as of yesterday, this is the tally. 379 people said yes, they wanted the tax. There should be a tax on prepared foods and drinks in Canon Beach. That's 4 more than the 375 people who said no. So that's the final count. As of now, the election results will be certified on Monday. The margin is wide enough with 4 votes that there won't be an automatic recount. But after Monday, if anyone in Canon Beach wants to request a recount, they can do that until December 7th. Now, we do have to brag a little bit because our own Pat Doris, esteemed Pat Doris, actually predicted this earlier this month when the vote was nearly tied. We took a little inspiration from our friends out in the other Portland, Portland number 2, as we call it, Portland, Maine. No offense to them. The city council vote there was tied, so election officials did the only rational thing they could think of, and they drew a name from an antique wooden bowl. Sure. They called that guy the winner. Turns out, though, in this case, the guy whose name wasn't drawn actually ended up winning after a recount a few weeks later. He did not respect the bowl. But out here in Oregon, we did our own extremely unofficial, unscientific tiebreaker that day for the Canon Beach foods tax because, frankly, we were bored, and it actually held true. Check this out.
Maybe we can give the elections officials in Clatsop County, though, a little bit of help. Just a minute. Let me show you what we have in mind. All right. So we have our own KGW hat, and I have 2 decisions here, no, and then yes. I'm going to put those in the hat. Won't look at them. No idea what's happening in there. No idea. Not have anything up my sleeve. And here is the final, decision. And the decision is yes. Oh my. I guess you are getting a prepared foods tax.
Oh my. For those of you wondering, no, we don't have much of a production budget. But Pat Doris, everyone, veteran reporter, fantastic KGW anchor, and now clearly election psychic. My goodness. All right, keep sending in your questions and your comments to the story at kgw.com. Find us on social media, reach out. We're going to finish the story right after this. So many questions and comments tonight. We love it. Thank you all for chiming in. Pick up your phone if you haven't, by the way. Follow us on Twitter at @TheStoryKGW. And as always, you can email thestory@kgw.com. All right, that does it for us. We have Laurel Porter standing by for the news at 6:30. Hey, Laurel.
Thank you, Maggie. We're hearing first tonight from a 12-year-old who escaped when a man tried to grab her on her way to school. The news at 6:30 starts now.
This is KGW News at 6:30.
I was startled at first, but when I actually got it through my head, I was really scared.
It was a terrifying